Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show hosted by a French professor who gets to talk about Mach-Hommy again with his EP Balens Cho, which is apparently Haitian Creole for hot candles. A couple disclaimers here. I am not an expert on Haitian culture or language, although I do teach a class called Haiti, the most important country in the world, and I mean it. I am not an expert on the Haitian language. I'm not an expert on the Haitian country. I'm not even an expert on Mach-Hommy. This is the year where I finally stopped sleeping on Mach-Hommy. I didn't pay any attention to new music until 2018, and he just somehow slipped under my radar. And ever since I first listened to and reviewed Pray for Haiti, he's quickly become probably my favorite active rapper. Probably in terms of rap style, in terms of approach, in terms of thematics, my favorite rapper. And that's all happened within the span of a year. And it's been an interesting year. I've reviewed 2 of his re-releases, and that's been interesting because I get to see a little bit of the progression. But really, as far as I can tell, all I would really need to understand the brilliance and the greatness of Mach-Hommy are his 2 2021 projects, Pray for Haiti and this Balens Cho. Balens Cho is an EP. It's 24 minutes long. But I swear to God, it's 24 hours long. There's no way this is just 24 minutes of music. It is so dense and so rich. It's basically 2 LPs in 1 EP. There's like this first half, which is very kind of boastful and drippy and very skillful and sort of a lot like the older EPs that I had heard. And the second half is very introspective. It's a journey into self. More importantly, it's a journey into the importance of self-care. It's self-deprecating. It's analyzing the relationship between family history and current attitude and psychology. It's this 24 minutes and we get all of this. In some ways, it's like a junior version of Pray for Haiti, which had a very similar wide berth, just a huge amount of material covered, a whole bunch of different perspectives, and a whole bunch of different styles. What's funny is I think you could, if you were not being charitable, say that Mach-Hommy always sounds the same. Now, before you get mad and start typing that I'm wrong, I didn't say that he always sounds the same. I'm saying if you're not really listening, in French, there's 2 different words, just like in English, to hear and to listen. So, you can entendre, you can hear this, but that doesn't mean you're listening. Écoutez. If you're really listening to what he's saying and the way that he says it, he has so much dynamism, so many different flows, so many different ways of singing, so many different ways of delivering all the information that he's delivering, but it requires a fair amount of attention. And it's that attention to detail that makes his music so enjoyable, makes his rhymes so enjoyable. Of course, it doesn't help that he's so mysterious that you can't find his lyrics. He removes them as soon as you see them. So there is an element to which he is kind of a throwback for me, back to the old days when you just didn't know rap lyrics. Like, you just heard them, and you just hoped that you were correct. But when Ghostface said blood on his Wally's like ketchup, you didn't know what Wally's were. You didn't know what they were spelled. You didn't know if Wally's was a reference to a restaurant. There's like a cheeseburger that he's putting his ketchup on. There wasn't genius. There was just these words, and you had to deal with them. One thing about this album that made me very happy is it's primarily produced by Nicholas Craven, the French-Canadian, I believe. He's French-Canadian, right? Yeah. There's a lot of these great... it's this whole world that we're living in now, where I try to explain to old heads, to people who think that hip-hop died in the late 90s, that we are living in the best age there's ever been for hip-hop. And part of it is because there's this never-ending flow of great top-level producers who can make beats that are interesting, challenging, avant-garde, while at the same time being a throwback to the things you love of the 90s. And Nicholas Craven is absolutely one of the best. My biggest complaint with this whole album is that there's very few beat changes. Most of the songs are just one great beat just played. But I think that's important. I think that's part of what makes this an EP. I guess we'd call it a mixtape. I don't really know. The reason that we don't take this as seriously as Pray for Haiti. Although again, in my mind, it's almost like West Side Gun, Side A and Side B. Like, this feels to me very connected to Pray for Haiti. So we had this great production, for the most part, by Nicholas Craven, which I'll get into in some great detail. Sorry, I need a sip of my hot honey water. And then we have Mach-Hommy's rapping. And he keeps releasing music, and I'm going to keep finding new and interesting ways of talking about his music. Hopefully. Especially about his bars, about his rhymes, and about his lyrics. Because, a lot of the songs, especially in the first half, you could just see as, just killer bar after killer bar. But it's not just this wit. That's the thing, it's not just wit. There is a lot of wit, but I think too often people put a lot of emphasis on cleverness and on, oh, that line, I can't believe he said he's got more loafers than welfare. That's a great line, okay? But to me, that's not where Mach-Hommy thrives. Where he thrives is in his ability to juxtapose words, to use his voice very effectively. It's what I call the Ghostface Killah school of rap, right? Where not every word actually means something, not every line actually means something. Some things do, some things don't. But at times, the rap cadence, the voice, the words are just a mass of, it's like another instrument. It's like another instrument, another rhythmic instrument, another melodic instrument, which is just a vehicle for this feeling that the mix between these amazing beats and these amazing words all go together. If you'll permit me, I want to go on a random aside that doesn't have much to do with Mach-Hommy at all, but does have to do with this style of rap. I want to tie this together with that Beatles documentary that came out last week, Let It Be. Get Back. So there's a scene, and I want to parallel Ghostface Killah style rapping, okay? This style which I love so much, which I think Mach-Hommy does very well, with good psychedelic lyrics. The song Something by George Harrison is a great song, and you see in this documentary as the Beatles start writing the song Something. Something in the way she moves, doo-boo-doo-boo-doo, doo-boo-doo, in case you don't remember the song and you want to hear it sung poorly. So in this little segment of this documentary, George Harrison says, something in the way she moves attracts me like, and he gets stuck. Attracts me like what? Attracts me like a moth to a flame, I don't know what. And he asks the rest of the Beatles. And John Lennon says this, just say what comes into your head at the time. Attracts me like a cauliflower. It doesn't matter. Say it until you get the word right. And it made me realize that John Lennon's lyricism in the psychedelic era, or the post-psychedelic era, was all based on this concept. Essentially the same thing, where he's saying, I am the Eggman, you are the Eggman, cuckoo-ca-choo. Cuckoo-ca-choo is not some random thing he just came up with. Cuckoo-ca-choo is a very deliberate thing. Picture yourself on a boat on a river. All of those lyrics, all of this bizarre, fantastical lyrics, are the result of work. And even if they don't all mean something, in aggregate, they give into this music and they complement the music in the same way that they would as if they were about something very concrete. It creates an atmosphere, the same way that Mach-Hommy is able to create an atmosphere. Ringo suggests something attracts you like a screwdriver, not very good. At some point, George Harrison says, attracts me like a cow to an elephant. But what does George Harrison end up settling on? Attracts me like no other lover. Not a complicated line, not witty, but holy cow, but it totally works. Attracts me like no other lover. The interior rhyme of other lover attracts other. These warm other sounds and the sharp attacks. That kind of craft, I believe, is the same kind of craft we see in this style of hip hop, where it's not always about the meaning or about wit or about brilliance, but about finding the right words. So about half of this album by Mach-Hommy, half of this EP, I would say is dedicated to that. The not meaningfulness, but the right words. And it seems to me that no one else is doing it better than him right now. Not even Ghostface. I mean, I like that new song, but I think even Mach-Hommy is perfecting this style of rap. Perhaps because he's not trying to sound like Ghostface. He's not trying to match the same sounds, but he's using a lot of the same techniques. But what's great about this album is that's not the only place he goes. That's not the only way he's rapping. He also has half of this very meaningful and engaging with fascinating, deeper themes. And he does it in a way that's not preachy, not overly preachy, in a way that's engaging, that's fun, that fits. There's something about his ability to go between Flossie and talking about selling crack and being a criminal, and then talking about the difficulty of diaspora and trust and self-care that makes this 24-minute album so dense and so rich. So let me give you an example. Let me start off with a stamp. This is an example song from the album, Separation of the Sheep and the Goats. Nicholas Craven does some of his best producing on here, but that's hard to say because basically every track is well produced. I'm going to include a link to it up here, so have a listen to the song. What you're going to hear is this out of nowhere, like barbershop loop. I don't know where these vocals are coming from. At the end of the loop, the vocals get a little bit louder. At a certain point, he adds in a little stutter step on a snare throughout the verse, and it's this really just gorgeous singing that plays very nicely with Mach-Hommy's slight lilting monotone and the gorgeousness of this voice, and then the sort of matter-of-factness of this very well-delivered, straightforward lyrics creates an amazing combination that's very satisfying. Maybe that's the word that's hard to define that would describe how I feel about this project. It's very satisfying, especially in the chorus to this song, where Mach-Hommy's voice is doubled. I think it's both his voice. And he gets this weird harmony where he's harmonizing with himself, but one version of himself is doing this weird low kind of sing-song singing that he does where he's not really trying to reach high notes. And I don't even... You just had to listen to it, okay? I don't know how they attained this weird, very minimal difference in voice register harmony, and it's just gorgeous. Separation of the Sheep and Goats is another good example of his style of lyricism as well, because at once he is both sheep and goat. There is the context of goat as greatest of all time, which many rappers try to claim to be. And so if he's saying separation of the sheep and the goats, he's separating himself from all the bad rappers. But of course, this is a quote from the Bible, Matthew 25:31. Before him, all the nations will be gathered, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And in this case, you want to be a sheep because the goats are all going to hell. All these things all mixed in together, with this reference to the Bible. It's a little bit odd as well because it's with images of animals. And if you know anything about the history or the nature of religion in Haiti, it's very mixed with traditionally West African religious traditions, sort of syncretized with Christian traditions. So there's another element there too, where separation of the sheep and the goats, sort of a more animalistic religion, is hinted at while being talked about in the context of a Christian quote, which is totally in keeping with the history of religion in Haiti, which, when I talk about why is Haiti the most important country in the world, it's tied with America, I would say. I'd say to understand the history of Haiti alongside the history of America, you understand basically the history of the world since Columbus. That's why I think it's so important, because you sort of see a country where everything goes very well and a country where everything goes badly, but goes badly because of racism and colonialism. Anyway, part of the reason it's so interesting is studying the nature of how do these religions mix together. And I think, this might be a stretch, but I think you hear it in this song as well. The second verse shows his funny, witty, interesting style, bizarre references. I don't know what he's talking about most of the time, and he doesn't allow us to know. He doesn't allow any explanation of his lyrics. So when he starts off the second verse, looking cloudy with a chance of meatballs, I know it's probably about guns or drugs. Is meatballs drugs? Meatballs is probably drugs. I don't know. But again, it's finding this beautiful, weird perspective and this connection of the words. And then later, look in your eyes and see remorse before the guillotine swings and cuts your head clean off. And this beautiful image of someone dying and seeing remorse. There's a depth to that lyric. Remorse is a very deep emotion that's being described here. Then he even gets political. All we blacks got is sports and entertainment until these crackers decide I did something that's worthy and redeeming. talking about, and then he gets to maybe my favorite bit of lyricism, and this is where he is witty. Perfect strangers, no Balki, referring to Balki Bartokomous, the character from the TV show Perfect Strangers. I'm rewatching The Sopranos, and Cousin Larry plays a doctor in. This is very exciting. Hey, it's Cousin Larry. I know it's a serious show, but you see Cousin Larry, you point out Cousin Larry. Smoke you like Korean barbecue, you know where the cal be. So here, kalbi is the short ribs that you eat at Korean barbecue. So he's rhyming balki with kalbi, and then I assume maybe the cal is like caliber weapon, and like B as opposed to calbi, Galbi, which is how you say the short ribs. It's Calbe, like you know where the caliber pistols will be. I don't know. So holler at me if you want the dome back. Not bad for some gibberish and monotone raps. Self-effacing, talking about the gibberish that he does, which is another word we could give to John Lennon's psychedelic lyricism, Ghostface lyrics, Mach-Hommy's lyrics. So often it is gibberish in the way that it's not always saying something. Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. I keep sauce. But not bad. He's actually talking about the success that he's having through this way, while also kind of making fun of himself. So let's go through the rest of the album. I'm going to start off with the first song, La Première Bougie. Oh, come on now. This is for the camera here. So that means the first candle. And the album is called Hot Candles. So I bought candles. I did. I went to Wegmans and I bought candles. Now, I didn't buy candles that might imitate the candles that are used in voodoo rituals or ceremonies because I'm not trying to be that cute. And also that's basically cultural appropriation. And I don't understand what the candle means to Mach-Hommy or in most of these religious ceremonies. But I still like the idea of having these candles. There's 5 candles in total throughout the album. They're these little interstitial moments that give extra structure to this EP, that help this EP to feel like a double LP when it's really just 24 minutes. Jesus, my video is going to be like 3 times as long as the album. So each of these candles has a weird interstitial audio clip of what sounds like a radio drama it's basically about how Americans see Haiti. So it's about these people going down to Haiti, trying to start some kind of import-export business, very exploitative, behaving, the way they talk, the way they exoticize Haiti, while also domineering it, while also colonizing it. America's history with Haiti is disastrous. We owe them a lot. Seriously, look up the history. The American Marines straight up robbed the bank. That's not a joke. They robbed the bank. The American Marines took the power of the American Marines and robbed the bank. That is just, and that's one of the nicest things that we did to Haiti in the history here. But what's interesting is maybe this is a commentary on me, the listener, because I am complicit in that mistreatment, given my history and my privilege, which comes from generations upon generations of exploitation and economic exploitation of non-white people. Maybe that's the way that white people interact with his music, or considering it, like let's go down and see what's happening and hear the mysterious sounds and the voodoo rituals. Or maybe it just sounds cool. I think that's my favorite thing about Mach-Hommy, my favorite thing about most music, is when you could just say, or I don't know, it's just cool. Let's start off with the first song, La Boue, and that means mud in French. And in Haitian Creole, La Boue, it's one word in Creole, 2 words in French. And Nicholas Craven just starts right off with a crazy horn loop that gets cut halfway through. It's super loud, it's a great declaration, it feels almost like a herald at a royal court. Immediately, Mach-Hommy starts rapping about get the deal done before the San Pellegrino stops bubbling. I love fizzy water, I just do. I love San Pellegrino, and this is another bubbling theme underneath, which is not about wealth, it's about taste. And that's one thing that Mach-Hommy is really pushing forward, is not just that he's wealthy, it's that he has taste. And part of having taste is knowing when and how to display your wealth. Talking that casually about San Pellegrino, to me, as somebody who's grown up around privilege, who's known a lot of people who are rich beyond all comprehension, that shows it. You know, more than champagne, like San Pellegrino, like the bubbly water at the table. Like, you're gonna pay the $6 to have the water when you can just have the free water, the tap water. Anyways, just little details there. The chorus has his trademark singing. I love that he doesn't usually have other people singing, or maybe ever. I don't know. I don't know his catalog well enough. I love the way he uses his voice. It has a lot of honesty, a lot of realness to it, and talking about getting himself out of the mud. A very solid flow all the way through. Last year, I was really picking lemons in the orchards. Now I'm revving the engines on a 911 Porsche. So this is this whole other theme about lemons and lemonade, but I haven't even heard that album, Mach's Hard Lemonade. So I don't really know what it means. I'm gonna take a guess. Drugs? Guns? I don't know. I don't know what lemons mean. And this goes back to that Ghostface style of rapping, in which it doesn't matter. I mean, you can tell me in the comments, please do. What do lemons mean? But it doesn't really matter. What matters is this, the way these words sound. I was really picking lemons in the orchard. Moves me like no other lover. Just all those words go together. He also introduces the term self-care. And I think this is on purpose because the album is going to end with the themes of self-care. I'm going to get into that in a second. The difference between self-care and self-love is the difference between Mach-Hommy and most other rappers. He also calls himself Rick Rubin and Russell, referring to Def Jam Records, the people who founded Def Jam Records. And it's fascinating as an idea. He sort of puts himself at the forefront of independent rap and what's happening right now, which I assume he deserves a lot of credit for, if not most of the credit for. And it's nice hearing this very knowledgeable reference to hip-hop history, because it's not enough to be Russell, and it's not enough to be Rick Rubin. To be both of them, that's where the power of Def Jam came from. Then we have the second candle. Let's see if this one lights a little bit better here. Another one of these interstitial moments. Some African drum sounds. The executives of Caribbean Exports the next day. That's another one of the things that we did that was really terrible. Was we forced bananas on Haiti when there weren't like Haiti. We basically forced this kind of agriculture and destroyed the country by building these railroads, which they didn't need, and tested out bombing systems on the rebels. It's if you don't feel bad about how America has interacted with Haiti, just do a little more research. Do your research. Now, don't do your research. Read books. Read Haiti: The Aftershocks of History by Laurent Dubois. I'll put a link in the comments. That'll tell you everything you need to know. Magnum Band Remix is the first track not produced. We had Separation of the Sheep and the Goats, then Magnum Band Remix. The first song not produced by Nicholas Craven is produced by Ross G, which is announced by someone saying Ross. And this is interesting because part of me wishes it was only Craven on here, but the people who produce who aren't Craven do such a good job that it really works. It does help to give more of a dynamic feel to the album. It's kind of this droning keyboard, a very Wu-Tang style beat, like just this awesome drum beat underneath. At certain times the drone changes and even the bass changes at a certain point. So there is maybe some of the most changing within the song, this very short album. It's called a remix of the song Magnum Band from the first album, but as far as I can tell, there's no connection between them except for maybe talking about the number 7. So I don't know. Is he just being cute, or I don't? Again, tell me in the comments, Hommyites, citoyen de Onville, why is this not just a totally different song? The first verse shows off his craft very well. He starts immediately saying, "Back when you was taking your shirt off for P.D. Pablo, blowing my pieces combo, lead put him to bed, Sleepy Hollow. Far's words for the feds, me no hablo." P.D. Pablo had a song in 2001, and if you were alive at the time, like I am, North Kakalaka Rise Up, you know exactly what he's talking about. So he doesn't have to say 2001. So he just uses Pablo, then sets it up, then Blown That Pieces combo, lead, put him to bed, sleepy hotto. As far as words for feds, hablo. We got the lead, bed, fed. We have these interior rhymes and then the end-line rhymes of hollow, hoblo, combo, Pablo. And he keeps it through most of this entire verse, this O sounds. Coolin' with my Mexican whiz like Frida Kahlo, Mexican artist. Sweet Moscato, she's a model. Doing this thing where he's rhyming Kahlo with model, just through the cadence of his voice. Just wanted to make a couple $100,000 in the street in Fleet of Cabo. Try to remain mystique and keep it wild low because they don't want to see a sun ball like C. Ceballos. Chris Ceballos was like a basketball player like 20 years ago. I had to look him up on Wikipedia. He's not some household name. In the Lago bumpin' Who Shot Ya, sit at the table with the goon posture, true mobster where killers make their way to su casa, seen a stock eaten in a mask like a doom poster. So he's referring to MF Doom, imposters, and rhyming posture with posture and mobster and casa. He's changing the rhymes with Spanish words from O, masculine, the masculine ending of nouns in Spanish, to a, like casa. And the whole thing just has all of those words put together in that agreeable way. And then we get an appearance by A.A. Rashid. Part of my joy, my ignorance is profound. I don't know much more than I know about all this independent rap stuff I'm getting into in these last couple of years. But every time when I see A.A. Rashid, I just circle that track and I go, I cannot wait. He's sort of like if Old Dirty Bastard was a poetic genius and a spoken word artist. Now, note, I'm not saying Old Dirty Bastard wasn't a genius. I think he might have been. And sort of like, I hate using the word low-key, but low-key, one of the most influential rappers. Low-key, the second most influential rapper out of Wu-Tang Clan after Ghostface. I didn't think about that take, so feel free to disagree with it in the comments because I might disagree with it myself. But there's something about the way that he brings levity and sort of joy in his spoken word, and he sounds a little silly, but then everything he says is so deep and mysterious. All space programs derived from Africa. I don't know what that means, but I get it. My culture is rooted in myth, art and poetry reshape reality. The tree that you eat from is upside down. Just these beautiful, fascinating lines. And in a way, when he's talking about my culture is rooted in myth, it reminds me a little bit of this all we blacks got is sports and entertainment. I think, from the previous song, I think there's a sort of interesting thing happening here that I don't quite know how to enunciate. But the connections between West African religions and the religions of the New World and the diaspora of Haiti, there's something that feels here sort of ancient. And it's hard to really describe how A.A. Rashid really helps this feeling for this whole album. But there is a sense of continuity between Mach-Hommy, at least that I get, between Mach-Hommy and his ancestors from West Africa who were put on boats so that a bunch of rich a-holes in Bordeaux, France could make beautiful chateaus. La troisième bougie, the third candle, is the next interstitial part. Let's see if this lights. Come on now. This video's long enough. There we go. Dramatic jungle drums in the distance. You ever see a better night for a moonlight swim? I really enjoy this very brief interstitial moment because it really is showing the exploitation that these people who are there for import-export then show up, and the drums of a ritual, the drums of the people, become a backdrop for them to go swimming. We then get to the song L'argent sale, which I had to look up what it meant, and then it made me laugh because l'argent sale is the word in French. It's not that different in Creole. It means dirty money. And this, I don't know why, it reminds me like De La Soul, the beat, the Nicholas Craven beat. Not that it sounds like De La Soul, but it kind of feels like it. It's just so happy. It's one of the happiest rap beats I've ever heard. It resolves, has this very upbeat feeling, and Mach-Hommy starts singing some of his great lyrics. His voice is a little bit too low in the mix. I'd say that's my one problem with the mixing on the whole album. But he like starts singing this chorus, and then as his verse gets going, he starts doing a sing-song in the beginning of the verse. Again, when you listen, not just hear Mach-Hommy, you hear all the variations just within this one song. He gets almost reggae in his delivery at some point, mixes in some Creole, I believe, I don't know. We don't have lyrics. It gets louder and clearer as the voice goes on. And then he has this amazing part where he talks about we very near you, and then he talks about you being weird, and he says the word very, I believe 16 times. I tried to count how many times he said very, 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 very weird, but it's a funny, interesting break. And it's the kind of thing where every time you listen to the song, you get excited for all the veries. The chorus is just very happy, gives you a sense of joy. Another great of that Ghostface style lyrics, where we was raised, we really played pickup sticks. I don't know what it means, but I know what it means. You can tell me what it means, but you don't have to tell me what it means. It's a beautiful sounding lyric. Too much sugar in his diet, not enough potassium. We know my love of potassium, my love of bananas. Then we get to the fourth. We're getting pretty quick here with all these candles. The fourth candle, la quatrième bougie. How would you like to attend a voodoo ceremony? All of these interstitial bits remind me of a lot of American culture about Haiti, which is often tied, in the 50s and 60s, often tied around mysticism and fear of and admiration of voodoo ceremonies. Of course, if you don't know, zombies come from Haiti, although in their original iteration, before they were co-opted, I don't think maliciously, but before they were co-opted by white America as a metaphor for consumerism, they were exclusively about slavery and about the fear of going back into slavery and being controlled by somebody else. The early days of Haiti in American culture are usually through these old voodoo horror movies, like White Zombie, and the way that they talk about Haiti very much feels like these interstitial moments. And after this fourth candle, the album changes. We get to the song Wooden Nickels, and this is why I'm telling you this album feels like it's 3 hours long. This is produced by Fortes. I don't know how we're going to pronounce this. I'm just going to pronounce it French. Fort. And it features Sam Gendel, I believe, on saxophone. And this is the emotional core of the album. It's very great jazzy. It's one of the better jazz. In general, I could do with it. I'm not a big fan of jazz beats. I often find them a little bit lacking, just because I like funk more. But here it's just great. And he sings over himself, and he sings about his life and about why is he cold? Why is he distant? Why is he a guy who wears a mask and doesn't talk about his lyrics and does very few interviews and seems so cold, colder than Antarctica? They try to crack the code while your man is so cold. See, remember the lessons taught by my grandfather. He helped people out. The man was a martyr. So he tells his whole story about his grandfather and about his father and about how debts are inherited but favors are not. Very interesting ideas. Sort of multi-generational tale. Sorry, hot honey water. I don't edit, as I like to say. So that just means that if my voice gets funky, you have to watch me drink hot honey water from my mug. I made merch. You can have a hot honey water yourself from a Kafka-style mug. Check in the description if you want, or don't. So it's intergenerational disappointment. And it shows the way that he feels his family's been treated and the way he's been treated and how selfishness and coldness is his only defense. He's giving a psychological portrait of himself. And then he starts talking about Henry. I don't have an answer. And God damn it, he's never going to answer it for us. But Henry is a very important name in Haitian history. I think he's talking about his own grandfather. I think Mach-Hommy's grandfather was probably named Henry, and that's who he's talking about. I've read some interviews with him where he talks about his grandfather refusing to speak French because it's the language of the colonizers, all that. Okay. I think that's who Henry is. But Henry is also Henri Christophe, the great revolutionary leader, one of the most important and misunderstood leaders in the history of Haiti, up there with Dessalines and Toussaint in in the founding fathers of the country. But he says, like, Henry is responsible for a lot of Americans, a lot of Haitians in America. But that's also very confusing because the current president of Haiti is named Ariel Henry. And he was educated in Montpellier, in France, and Boston as well. And he might have been the guy who killed the other president who appointed him. It's not quite clear. Haitian politics are very bloody and very sad. So I don't think that's who he's talking about. But still, whatever it is, just throwing out a name, just throwing out Henry is a very confusing thing for him to do, for someone who studied a fair amount about Haiti, both in the past and the present. But it ends up being this great diaspora story in any event. Whoever this Henry is, who sends his brother-in-law to Paris to study paint, and then he never returns a letter, never says anything. And then talking over and over again about how these strong people who like left and who've tried to make something are not paid back. And I really think that's a fascinating idea about why is he so bitter. He's bitter because he's not getting the respect he deserves, and his father didn't get the respect he deserves, and his grandfather doesn't get the respect he deserves. And by the way, his entire culture doesn't get the respect it deserves. His entire cultures don't get the credit they deserve. Okay, we're talking African American culture, Haitian American culture, Haitian culture, African diaspora culture. None of it is getting the respect that it deserves. It's getting all of the bias and all the racism and all the mistreatment, but the actual respect isn't really showing up. I guess I'm supposed to be happy with a chain and butter leather. You got me, yeah, whatever. Ain't gonna leave me with 2 wooden nickels to rub together. So he's aware of his betrayal, the betrayal that's coming, the betrayal that's at the heart of the experience of his family, and by extension, his people. That's all. Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. He's just saying goofy stuff, you know? Next song, Traditional. Oh, geez, I didn't even mention the production. The production at the end of Wooden Nickels is insane. It's like a minute and a half of instrumental, and there's this like saxophone that just gets extended on this one note. It's like Neil Young playing a guitar solo where it's just like one note for 3 minutes, and it's so emotional. It's like the emotional wail of history, just going, and just doesn't let you go, and just keeps going. God damn, this is a good album. Traditional is the next song, going back with Nicholas Craven. Sounds kind of like a 70s TV show soundtrack a little bit with a cool bell. This song I think maybe needs a B section more than any other song, but also it's like under 2 minutes long. This is mostly about the cost of poverty, about black misery as a tradition, and his status as an outsider. So it's both sort of a general statement about the mistreatment of the poor and of African Americans and of poor African Americans, while at the same time being about himself. Again, continuing on with the previous song. What happens when conditions ain't livable? That's the question. When your vision ain't visible. People who have no hope, what happens? That's the question that he's asking. He's asking us to ask about the people in his situation, the people in his life. When the conditions aren't livable and the visions aren't visible. If you can't dream, right? Just dream of a better life. That dream is very not attainable for a astoundingly large percentage of the population. This mournful and realist tone is all the way throughout. So this is a guy who talks about like the Porsches and being rich and all drippy and all that in San Pellegrino, but he's also very cognizant of the visions aren't visible. And he talks about himself. You're not accessible, you're enigmatic and mystical. Up on that mountain, no one comes to visit you. Talking about perhaps how he's alienating himself and preventing himself from having total success. But then he makes a line which is just great for an Xer like me. Only Olivia Newton-John didn't make more money off of physical. So physical has 2 meanings. Physical means the song by Olivia Newton-John. Let's get physical, physical. I wanna get physical, physical. With you, I don't know the rest of the song. I hated that song. But when I was growing up, you heard that song everywhere. It was sort of the unofficial soundtrack to the fitness craze of the early 80s. But it also means physical releases. You know, if Mach-Hommy ever releases this album as an EP for $200, I will have to wait online. I'll have to be there at exactly 10 o'clock at a specific date at a specific website and hope that my order goes through. He has figured out a way to make money while still being inaccessible. And it's through his knowledge of how to manipulate the physical media market. In a world where physical media is apparently obsolete, he is making more money than Olivia Newton-John. And this isn't just flossing. This is showing his intellect and his intelligence and how he's able to control everything. We then get the fifth and final candle. Okay, let's not burn my house down. I like my house. You know where the cow will be. Money Magnets is the next song. Messiah music featuring Fahim Thagad. Cool keyboard line blaring. Again, more of a Wu-Tang style beat. The bass line is very, very RZA. You know, RZA had this way of getting these grimy beats that are just so good. Reminds me a lot of Shame on It, that song. It's a good flow, some cool like space in the words, and then playful words like parum-pa-pum-pum. It's nice hearing the God Fahim on here. It's always great to hear the way his voice interacts with Mach-Hommy. I am famous for underrating Thagad Fahim. That is just my ignorance that's speaking. Every time I listen to Thagad Fahim, I like him more. So I just need more exposure. I need to have more interaction with his output. I am not disparaging Thagad Fahim. He's not there yet in my head on that level of amazing rappers. But every time I say that, some people get annoyed, and that's okay. I'm not telling you I'm right. I'm telling you I'm ignorant. So put that in your comments. But I don't like this song. I like this song. I like this song. If it was independent, if it was a single, if it was on some other project, if it was some other place on the album, I would like it. But its position here, it's a banger. It's a total banger. It's maybe like the best, hardest. Like if I were to play one song off this album for like somebody who like thinks that hip hop fell off in 2000, I play them this song and they're like, oh yeah, bars and beats and awesome. But it interrupts the flow at the end of this album with this introspection that started with these questions, with wooden nickels and with all of the movement and traditional. Again, what is traditional, by the way, in the song Traditional? What's traditional is the oppression of the poor and the non-white. I believe that's what's traditional. There's these sort of like larger themes and self-analytical themes about the history of his family and himself and why is he mystical and all that. And then we just get a money song in the middle of it. And I just wish it were somewhere else, but it's a good song. Then we end the album with Self-La, which I assume means self-love. Now, this is a great beat. I'm a little bit upset that the final words on this album are the producer tag for Conductor. Conductor, we have a problem. Because Conductor just did this one song. As far as I know, Craven doesn't have a producer tag. If I were him, I would take some random quote in French from Freddy Krueger and make that my tag. Wouldn't that be awesome? Just like some random like chopped up bit of Freddy Krueger with a French Canadian accent. Anyways, that's a free idea out there. But it's an amazing beat for an amazing song, a transcendently good song, a song which could be its own video. It's about self-love, but it's not really. This is the thing. Self-love is a very specific term in the history of philosophy, and especially in the history of French philosophy. Self-love is often seen as the most detestable thing that a human being can have. It means the love of self over love of others. It's a lack of compassion, a lack of empathy. It's thinking of one as being better. It is at the root of all evil to many philosophers who have studied the concept of self-love. It's a thing that drives us to appear different than we truly are. It's a thing that drives us to hurt other people and to be obsessed with ourselves at the cost of those around us. They cost us to think about our image, to think about our status, and allow everything else in our world to burn to the ground as long as we can love ourselves. Because at the basis of that self-love is a hatred of self that we think if we just do enough, if we conquer enough, if we buy enough, if we have enough, then we will be able to replace that hatred with love. That is the basis of most music, most art, most everything in all cultures everywhere for all history. That's sort of the sad truth. And certainly rap music is quite often one of the most filled with that kind of self-love. I actually published a paper a couple years ago where I talked about how we can use Jay-Z to illustrate the themes of self-love as described by 17th century French philosophers. He's the most aware of it, which is why it makes it interesting. He doesn't do it thoughtlessly. He talks about it himself. I could go through the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles and be so satisfied and not look myself in the eyes. So what he's talking about here in self-love isn't really self-love. It really is self-care, which is a true kind of self-love. It's the kind of love of yourself that helps people around you as opposed to hurts you, right? Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be a good person. You just can't. You can't be a good father. You can't be a good son, a good brother, a good friend, a good husband. If you're not taking care of yourself, if you don't know how to keep yourself in line, these goddamn videos are part of my self-care regimen. My job's very tough. I don't feel fully appreciated. I don't feel like I get to express myself the way I want to. I need hobbies. I have a very active mind. This channel, despite the fact that it's a thing I do and it's now a small source of secondary income, buy my mugs, it's actually self-care. Just like going to the gym is self-care. Just like going to the therapist is self-care. And if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be as good of a father. I'm a great father, or as good of a husband. I'm an awesome husband, except when I force my wife to stay upstairs for 48 minutes while I talk about some 24-minute rap album, and I turn the heating off so you don't hear hold it the whole time. So there's something fairly radical about this self-care that he's talking about here, and I think it's the real gem of the album and one of the best Mach-Hommy songs I've ever heard. I would very much like, if somehow or possible, to get FD Signifier hip to this song. I am on his Patreon, maybe I'll send him a message, but he sings a lot about straight black male identity and the way that the mistreatment of bodies and of spirits. And this song feels to me to be very much in that, fighting that tendency by being a cry for self-care. Oh, if you look at his last video, you can see my name in the credits of the Patreon. It's awesome. I'm all excited. Professor Sky record review. Oh, okay. Now, let's talk about Conductor's sample here. Oh my God. It's so good. It's so good. Thank you to everybody who encourages me and pushes me to talk so much about Mach-Hommy. You're giving me license to do what I want to do anyway. So the sample comes from the 70s soft rock band Bread. Just a band that sounds like bread, just bread. It's this cool, blown out, totally blown out sample. Almost unrecognizable, it's so weirdly mixed and crackle of the vinyl. And the words are this: is there someone you know, you're loving them so, but taking them all for granted, you may... And then it gets cut off. God damn, I'm a great singer today. Said no one ever. Now, what's fascinating about this is it's talking about loving somebody, but taking them for granted. The actual song continues past the sample, taking them all for granted, you may lose them one day. Who is he talking about loving? Who is the song about loving? Who are you loving them so, but taking them for granted? Yourself. I don't have a microphone. That's a drop the lighter moment. This song, which is about taking a lover for granted, is actually about taking yourself for granted. Because as the lyrics start, he talks about, do you thank your heart for beating? Do you thank your lungs for breathing? And matched with it is his flow, which is unlike any other flow. And it reminds me of one of my least favorite flows of all time. I Need Love by LL Cool J. Sit back in the room, I hear my conscience call. That kind of like super high, syrupy love letter, smooth rapping of I Need Love by LL Cool J. Do yourself a favor, listen to Self Love and I Need Love by LL Cool J back to back. Even the sounds of the beats sound a little bit similar. But I love it in this case. It actually made me like the LL Cool J song more because he's loving himself. He needs love of self. The whole thing even gets even deeper. It's sort of an anti-materialist song. It's about the gift of life. I am infinite wealth, but it all starts with loving yourself. He talks over and over again, do you ever stop to thank your heart for beating? What if you had to stop and thank your lungs to start breathing? This real sense that life is a gift. It's a difficult gift. Being solid puts a lot of strains on the joints, but it is a gift. And it's really one of the most inspirational and anti-materialist songs you've ever heard. Because it's not just saying, oh, you rap about luxury, that's stupid. It's talking about what is real luxury. All this talk of securing bags is hysterical. You are the bag and you're going to stay rich if you take care of you. Material is not comparable. People stay dripped in designer, but they treat themselves terrible. It's effed up, head to toe rockin' Fendi, but when it comes time to eat, they go and buy Wendy's. This image of not taking care of yourself physically, but I believe also spiritually, is a great image of wearing Fendi and eating at Wendy's, and then later eating a gas station hot dog in the back of a Bentley. Great rhymes, very clever, very funny, but also about this difference between class and taste. And that part of having taste is also taking care of yourself. Like part of having that San Pellegrino wealth as opposed to the Cristal wealth is the ability to take care of yourself. Talks about social media addiction, maybe once again saying the fact that he could be probably richer if he was more of a public figure. He's a healthier and happier person. It's a song about caring for yourself. It is a necessary song for all races and all people, although I suspect particularly important for people of his socioeconomic and racial background to hear. We all need to hear, take care of yourself. You've only got one body, you've only got one mind, just take care of it. That's the only luxury. That's the only luxury. It's a lot more than a mixtape, huh? 51, you know, my last video was 51 minutes as well, and that was about a 2-hour-long quadruple album. So that just goes to show how deep it is. Also, I want to say this is the first time I've ever been made into a meme on the Mach-Hommy subreddit. Someone made that, saying they're more excited for my review than Anthony Fantano's. As you all know, I like Anthony Fantano a lot, but I've never been a meme. That's like my favorite meme format, the Drake meme. I love that meme. So thank you to whoever did that. Feel free to put it in the comments, and I'll pin it there as a thank you to you. And then also, I've already done my my Patreons for this week, but I'm going to show them again because it was so awesome seeing my name in the FD signifiers thing. So these are people who give me money, and when they give me money, some of that money is going to go to buying music. Some of it might even help me, you know, buy the damn Mach-Hommy album when it comes out. But I need more Patreons to do that. So give me money so I can afford to buy Balens Cho when it comes out. Awesome. And subscribe and smash the like bucket and buy my stupid mug. Okay. Until next time, there's the camera.